The airport terminal was calm until the German Shepherd broke formation and everything shattered in a single breath. His roar cut through the polished hall like a warning siren, echoing off glass and steel, forcing travelers to freeze mid-step. Officers shouted commands as the dog charged toward a woman, pushing a stroller, panic spreading faster than understanding. She screamed and pulled back, certain she was being attacked, yet the dog did not strike her. His body lowered, angled, protective, eyes locked on the stroller itself. Passengers backed away as the shepherd lunged again, not with rage, but with a fierce urgency that felt deliberate and controlled. The officers hesitated, sensing something was wrong, because the dog was shielding rather than threatening. In that moment, fear twisted into confusion as the woman realized his focus was not her face, but the blanket resting beneath her sleeping baby's chin. The dog barked again, louder, desperate, ignoring every command drilled into him. He leapt forward and pressed his body against the stroller, placing himself between the infant and the world. The terminal fell silent as officers rushed closer, radios crackling, hearts pounding, while the dog refused to move. Something unseen had been found. An instinct had already made its choice. Before this moment carries us deeper into what no one inside that terminal was prepared to face, stay connected to what happens next. Stories like this spread because people choose to carry them forward. If courage, instinct, and impossible timing move you, support this story by liking and subscribing now. And as you listen, share the country you are watching from, because this moment began in one airport, but its impact reaches far beyond it. The airport had been operating on routine rhythm that morning, the kind built on repetition and trust. Travelers moved through security with practiced impatience, dragging carry-ons, checking phones, rocking babies to sleep under fluorescent lights that never truly rested. For most people, this terminal was only a temporary space between destinations, a place where nothing personal was meant to happen. Yet for the woman pushing the stroller, it was already the center of her entire world. She had arrived early, following every instruction carefully, keeping her child close, moving calmly through the crowds without realizing she was already being watched. She had been awake most of the night before the flight, not from fear, but from the familiar exhaustion that comes with caring for an infant alone. Her baby slept peacefully beneath a soft blanket, unaware of the noise, the strangers, or the weight of the journey ahead. The stroller had never left her sight for more than a few seconds at a time, moments she replayed again and again in her mind later, trying to understand how anything could have gone wrong. She remembered stopping briefly near a charging station. She remembered a stranger brushing past her shoulder. She remembered nothing that felt dangerous, because danger rarely announces itself when it arrives. The canine unit had entered the terminal, as it always did, calm and controlled, part of a standard security sweep meant to reassure as much as protect. The German Shepherd walked in perfect formation beside his handler, his pace steady, his attention outward but relaxed. He had worked dozens of terminals like this before, trained to filter out noise, emotion, and distraction until only what mattered remained. Crowds did not disturb him. Children did not distract him. Routine did not dull his awareness. His instincts had been sharpened by years of discipline, but guided by something deeper that could not be taught. As the team moved down the main corridor, nothing seemed unusual at first. The air carried familiar layers of sound and scent, food vendors, luggage wheels, perfume, fuel, and recycled air. Most dogs would have treated it as meaningless clutter. This one did not. Somewhere between the security checkpoint and the boarding gates, something cut through the background noise with violent clarity. It was not loud. It was not visible. It was wrong. The dog slowed for half a second, just long enough for his handler to feel the change through the leash. His breathing shifted. His ears angled forward. His body lowered, not in aggression, but in assessment. Training told him to continue. Instinct told him to lock on. Within moments, instinct won. The stroller entered his field of awareness, not as a person or an object, but as a concentration point where danger hid behind innocence. What mattered was not the woman. What mattered was not the child. What mattered was what did not belong. From the mother's perspective, the world fractured without warning. 1 second she was walking forward, focused on her gate number and the quiet weight of her sleeping baby. The next, the air erupted with barking that echoed off glass and steel, freezing the terminal mid-step. Fear surged instantly, sharp and overwhelming, because every protective instinct inside her screamed that something was wrong. She pulled back on the stroller, shouting without thinking, reacting as any parent would when a threat appeared near their child. Officers reacted with equal urgency, voices rising, commands shouted, training taking over before understanding caught up. They saw a dog break formation, saw a stroller, saw panic spreading like wildfire through the crowd. From the outside, it looked like chaos. From the inside, it was precision colliding with misunderstanding. The German Shepherd did not see a baby. He saw a container. He saw concealment. He saw risk measured in seconds rather than explanations. As officers closed in, the dog adjusted his posture, lowering himself, placing his body not between threat and officer, but between threat and child. His movements were deliberate, controlled, protective. He was not attacking, he was shielding. The distinction mattered, even if no one yet understood it. The woman saw it in his eyes before she understood it with her mind. The focus was not on her face, it was on the blanket, it was on what lay beneath. When the object rolled free across the floor, the sound it made was small, almost harmless, a soft metallic bounce that should have meant nothing. Instead, it changed everything. The reaction from the officers was immediate and unmistakable. Training replaced confusion in a single breath. Space was created. Voices dropped. Fear shifted from instinctive panic to something colder and more controlled. The mother did not yet know what the object was, but she knew from the expressions around her that her child had been closer to danger than she could comprehend. As alarms began to sound and passengers were pushed back, the dog did not move. He stayed where he was, pressed against the stroller, breathing steady, eyes alert, guarding a life that could not protect itself. In that moment, the terminal was no longer just an airport. It was the edge of something that could have gone catastrophically wrong. And the only reason it had not was because an animal trained to notice what humans missed refused to ignore what his instincts demanded he confront. The mother stood frozen as officers carefully repositioned her and the stroller, their movements controlled but urgent, creating distance without causing panic to spill into hysteria. Her arms trembled as she instinctively reached for her child, every nerve screaming to pull him close, yet she obeyed every instruction without question. She could feel the weight of fear pressing down on her chest, heavy and suffocating, because something had happened that she could not yet explain. The German Shepherd remained anchored at her side, his body angled toward the stroller, his presence steady enough to keep her from collapsing completely. The lead officer crouched slowly, eyes fixed on the metal cylinder resting on the terminal floor. He did not touch it immediately. He studied it the way a surgeon studies a wound, searching for signs that confirmed what his instincts already warned him about. The dog's low growl continued, not loud, not aggressive, but persistent, vibrating through the polished floor like a warning meant only for those trained to hear it. That sound alone told the officers everything they needed to know. This was not a false alert, this was not a misunderstanding. As the officer finally reached forward with gloved hands, the atmosphere shifted again. The terminal felt smaller, tighter, as if every wall had moved inward. The mother watched his face change, the instant he lifted the object. Color drained from his skin, his jaw clenched. He rose to his feet and raised his voice, ordering everyone nearby to move back immediately. The urgency in his tone cut through the noise more effectively than any alarm. People obeyed without hesitation, fear now guided by authority rather than confusion. The woman's legs weakened beneath her as reality began to surface. She stared at the object, then at her child, then back at the dog who had refused to leave his position. Her mind raced through every moment of her morning, every place she had stopped, every stranger who had passed too close. None of it made sense. She had followed the rules. She had been careful. Mothers always believe that careful is enough. In that moment, she learned how fragile that belief could be. The German Shepherd shifted slightly, adjusting his stance as officers widened the perimeter. His eyes never left the object in the officer's hands. His ears twitched at every raised voice, every hurried footstep, every crackle of radio communication. He was not reacting to chaos. He was tracking threat escalation. His training told him the danger had not ended simply because the object was visible. Whatever had been hidden was only part of a larger sequence. When bomb technicians arrived, their presence confirmed what the officers already feared. Specialized equipment was deployed with precision, movements practiced and silent. The mother was guided farther back, her hands gripping the stroller so tightly her knuckles burned. Tears slid down her face without sound as the truth settled in layers. This had not been random. This had not been an accident. Someone had placed something dangerous beneath her child and expected it to pass unnoticed. Throughout it all, the dog stayed close, his posture protective but calm, as if he understood that panic would only make things worse. He leaned his weight slightly toward the stroller, creating a barrier with his own body. That simple act steadied the woman more than words ever could be. She watched him breathe. She matched her breaths to his. In the middle of flashing lights and rising tension, that animal became her anchor. When an officer finally spoke to her again, his voice was measured, careful, as if choosing the right words could soften what could not truly be softened. He explained that the canine only reacted that way when the threat was severe. The mother nodded numbly, her mind struggling to accept the implications. Severe meant intentional. Severe meant targeted. Severe meant her child had been used as cover for something far beyond her understanding. As passengers were ushered away and barriers formed around the scene, the terminal transformed into something unrecognizable. The familiar hum of travel gave way to controlled urgency. The dog lifted his head slightly, scanning the crowd beyond the cordon. His instincts remained engaged, searching for the source that had introduced danger into this space. He knew, even if no one else did yet, that the story was not finished. Someone had planted the threat, and someone had walked away, counting on silence and distraction to protect them. The terminal tightened under the weight of controlled panic as officers expanded the perimeter, their movements precise and rehearsed, every step designed to prevent escalation. Announcements echoed overhead, calm in tone but unmistakably urgent, instructing passengers to halt, remain where they were, and follow directions without delay. The mother stood behind the cordon, hands locked around the stroller handle, her entire body trembling as she tried to process how quickly an ordinary morning had turned into a nightmare. She kept her eyes on her child, counting each breath he took, terrified that looking away might somehow invite disaster back into their lives. The German Shepherd remained at her side, shifting subtly as the environment changed, recalibrating to new variables the way only a working dog could. His ears tracked movement across the terminal, filtering footsteps, voices, and the rising static of fear. His focus was no longer fixed solely on the object that had been removed. It had widened. He was scanning for intent, for the human signature that had accompanied the threat. Officers noticed the change immediately. Dogs like him did not relax unless the danger had fully passed. As bomb technicians worked methodically, the mother was questioned by multiple officers, each inquiry layered with urgency but delivered gently. Had anyone approached her earlier? Had she set the stroller down unattended? Had anyone offered help, directions, or conversation that now felt out of place? She shook her head repeatedly, her answers fragmented by shock, insisting she had never let her child out of sight. One officer explained softly that crowded terminals created opportunities measured in seconds, not minutes. And sometimes that was all it took. The explanation did nothing to ease her guilt. The German Shepherd let out a low, controlled growl, not directed at the officers, but toward the open space beyond the security barrier. His body angled slightly, muscles tightening again. A handler placed a steadying hand near his harness, reading the signal instantly. The dog was detecting something unresolved. The handler relayed the warning without hesitation, and officers adjusted their positions, eyes sweeping the crowd with renewed intensity. Security footage was pulled up in real time, screens glowing with grainy images of the terminal from moments earlier. Officers clustered around, scanning for anomalies, replaying angles from multiple cameras. The mother watched helplessly from a distance, her mind spiraling as she wondered whether the person responsible was still nearby, blending into the crowd, watching her panic unfold. The thought made her stomach twist violently. Suddenly, the German Shepherd stiffened completely. His ears snapped forward, his gaze locked onto a corridor leading away from the terminal floor. His breathing deepened, measured, and intense. He took a single step forward, then another, tension radiating through his frame. The handler followed his line of sight, then signaled sharply to nearby officers. Something had triggered the dog again, not the lingering presence of the device, but the living source connected to it. In the distance, movement broke the pattern of compliance. A figure shifted abruptly, turning away from the controlled crowd, weaving through passengers with unnatural urgency. The dog's growl sharpened, his stance lowering as instinct took over. Officers reacted instantly, shouting commands, their voices cutting through the terminal noise. The figure did not stop. He ran. The German Shepherd surged forward at the end of his lead, muscles exploding with controlled force. His handler released him without hesitation, trusting training forged for moments exactly like this. The dog launched into pursuit, his focus absolute, his path direct, cutting through the terminal with terrifying speed. Officers followed in formation, boots pounding against polished floors as alarms intensified around them. The mother watched it unfold in stunned silence, her mind barely able to register the rapid sequence of events. Her hands clutched the stroller as if it were the only thing anchoring her to reality. She realized with a cold certainty that the danger had never truly left. It had only shifted form. And now, guided by instinct sharper than technology or human judgment, the German Shepherd was closing in on the truth that had tried to hide among ordinary travelers. The chase ended not with violence, but with exposure. The suspect was intercepted near a service corridor that led toward restricted baggage access, a place where few passengers ever had reason to be. Officers cornered him before the German Shepherd reached full contact, weapons drawn, voices sharp and commanding. The man froze, hands raised too slowly, breath coming in shallow bursts that betrayed more than fear. The dog halted just feet away, stance rigid, eyes locked, reading every micro-movement with terrifying accuracy. This was not a stranger startled by chaos. This was someone who knew exactly why he had been running. As officers restrained the man and pressed him against the wall, the German Shepherd remained fixed in place, unmoving, unblinking. He did not bark again. He did not growl. He simply watched, as if waiting for confirmation of something he had already known. One officer patted the suspect down and stiffened immediately, fingers pausing at an inner pocket. A small device was removed, not explosive, but electronic. A tracker, active, transmitting. The meaning hit all at once. The object in the stroller was not meant to detonate there. It was never designed to explode inside the terminal. It was designed to pass through unnoticed, to be carried, to be delivered. The mother was never the target, she was the vessel. Officers exchanged grim looks as bomb technicians confirmed the truth moments later. The cylinder had been a component, not a trigger, a piece meant to move through security embedded in the most unsuspected place imaginable. A baby stroller. Whoever planted it had counted on invisibility, on the assumption that no one would ever search something so innocent. The plan had relied entirely on human blind spots. Except the dog had none. The German Shepherd shifted his attention back toward the terminal, toward the mother and child he had refused to leave. His handler understood instantly. The dog had not reacted because of aggression. He had reacted because the threat was incomplete, still active, still in motion. He had not been stopping an attack. He had been interrupting a delivery. Security footage was replayed again, slower now, frame by frame. The suspect appeared repeatedly in the background, never close enough to raise suspicion, always adjusting his position, always watching. He had followed the mother through multiple checkpoints, waiting for a moment of distraction, a pause, a turn of her head. The device had been placed during a routine security interaction when her attention was split for less than 5 seconds. 5 seconds had nearly changed everything. The mother listened as the explanation unfolded, her face draining of color with every word. She pressed her child closer, trembling not just from fear, but from the crushing realization that her baby had been used without her knowledge, that someone had calculated her movements, her instincts, her trust. She felt violated in a way she did not yet have words for. The German Shepherd stepped closer to her again, positioning himself between her and the open space of the terminal, as if the threat might still return. His breathing slowed. His posture softened just enough to signal completion. The danger had been identified. The chain had been broken. Officers later said that if the dog had hesitated even seconds longer, the device would have passed through security entirely. Its destination would have been somewhere far beyond that terminal, somewhere crowded, somewhere catastrophic. Instead, the plan collapsed under the weight of instinct no one could outthink. The twist was simple and terrifying. The dog had not saved one child. He had stopped something that was never supposed to be seen at all. The terminal did not erupt into chaos all at once. It collapsed into it. Lockdown alarms rolled through the airport in layered waves, metal doors sliding shut, overhead announcements cutting mid-sentence as security protocols seized control of the space. Travelers were funneled into secured zones, their confusion rising as officers moved with a speed and coordination that left no room for questions. The suspect was rushed away through a restricted corridor, his face hidden, his body bent forward, as if the weight of what he had failed to accomplish was finally pressing down on him. At the center of it all, the mother remained frozen. She sat on the polished floor beside her stroller, arms wrapped around her baby, rocking slightly as adrenaline drained from her body in uneven waves. Her child slept on, oblivious, breath soft and steady against her chest. The contrast was unbearable. Around her, trained professionals moved with urgency and precision, but she felt detached from it all, as if the world had split into two realities that no longer touched. One officer knelt in front of her, speaking calmly, deliberately, choosing every word with care. He explained that she and her child were no longer in danger, that the device had been fully secured, that protective custody was already arranged, that none of this was her fault. She nodded mechanically, tears slipping down her face, not because she doubted him, but because her body had not yet accepted that survival was real. The German Shepherd remained beside her the entire time. He did not pace. He did not bark. He did not seek praise or attention. He positioned himself with his flank angled toward the stroller, head turned outward, scanning the terminal with unwavering focus. His muscles stayed engaged, ready, as if he understood that threats did not always announce themselves loudly. Officers noticed it. So did the bomb technicians. No one asked him to move. When medical personnel finally approached, the dog allowed them through without resistance, stepping back only when the baby was gently examined. The moment the child was cleared and returned to his mother's arms, the dog resumed his position. That choice alone said everything about his priorities. Security footage continued to play in a nearby command area as analysts traced the suspect's movements backward through the day. Each frame added another layer to the horror. The man had arrived hours earlier. He had circled the terminal repeatedly. He had abandoned one attempt, then waited patiently for another. He had watched families, weighed options, and chosen the stroller not because it was convenient, but because it was perfect. The plan had been elegant in its cruelty. A delivery system no one would question, a carrier no one would suspect, a shield built from innocence. Except the dog had broken formation. Handlers later admitted that the German Shepherd's behavior defied standard conditioning. He had not alerted at a distance. He had not followed protocol. He had made a judgment call that no command had instructed him to make. He had overridden training in favor of instinct, prioritizing protection over procedure. That decision had changed everything. As the terminal slowly stabilized and passengers were informed that the threat had been neutralized, whispers spread. People pointed discreetly. Phones were raised and then lowered again, unsure whether the moment deserved documentation or reverence. Many would later say they felt it without understanding it, that something had nearly happened and had been stopped at the last possible second. The mother finally found her voice again. She looked down at the German Shepherd, her hands still shaking, and whispered a thank you so quiet it barely carried past her lips. The dog did not look at her. He did not need to. His tail shifted once, slow and deliberate, a silent acknowledgement that the job was not about gratitude, it was about outcomes. Officers escorted her through a secure exit as the terminal behind them buzzed with aftermath. The dog walked at her side the entire way, never pulling ahead, never falling back. When they reached the secured transport vehicle waiting outside, he stopped and sat, watching until the door closed and the vehicle pulled away. Only then did his posture change. Only then did the tension leave his body. Those who witnessed it would later struggle to explain what they felt in that moment. It was not awe. It was not relief alone. It was the understanding that something unseen had been intercepted by something equally unseen. A plan dismantled by instinct. A catastrophe undone by loyalty. A life protected by a creature that never needed to be told what mattered most. The climax was not the chase. It was the interruption. And the world never noticed how close it had come. By the time the airport returned to a controlled calm, the story had already begun to travel beyond the walls of the terminal. Not as headlines or footage, but as quiet retellings shared between shaken passengers, officers, and staff who understood how narrowly disaster had been avoided. There were no explosions to point to, no visible damage to repair, and that was precisely what made the moment so heavy. Everything looked normal again, yet nothing felt the same. The mother and her child were taken to a protected location, surrounded by personnel whose presence finally allowed her to release the fear she had been holding inside. Hours later, when the tremors in her hands had slowed and her breathing no longer caught painfully in her chest, she replayed the moment over and over in her mind. The sound of the bark, the sudden weight of the dog against the stroller, the way instinct had intervened where awareness had failed. She knew, with a clarity that would never leave her, that her life had been divided into two parts. Before the dog, and after him, the German Shepherd returned to his unit without ceremony. There were no public commendations that day, no cameras, no applause. His handler removed the harness carefully, running a familiar hand along his back, checking for signs of strain. The dog accepted the touch calmly, eyes still alert, posture steady. To him, the event was not extraordinary. It was a completed task, a threat identified, a life protected. That was enough. Later analysis would confirm what many had already suspected. The device had been real, functional, timed in a way that would have caused devastating loss if it had passed through security unchecked. Investigators would trace the suspect's movements across multiple airports, uncovering patterns that pointed to something far larger than a single attempt. But none of that erased the simple truth that mattered most. One dog had stopped what countless systems had not yet detected. In the days that followed, footage surfaced. Still images captured the moment of intervention. The dog's body angled protectively, the stroller frozen in place. The object on the floor, millions would see it, react to it, and move on. But those who were there would remember something else entirely. The silence just before understanding, the shift in the air when instinct took control, the feeling that something invisible had been torn away from the future. The mother would later write a letter she never expected to send. She addressed it not to a department or an agency, but to the dog himself. She wrote about fear, about trust, about how her child still slept peacefully, unaware that his life had almost taken a different path. She wrote about gratitude too deep for words, and about a debt she could never repay. The handler read it quietly, then folded it carefully and placed it where the dog slept. The German Shepherd never knew his name would be spoken far beyond that terminal. He never knew how many lives he had protected, not just one. What he knew was simpler. Danger had been present, innocence had been near, and he had done what instinct demanded. That was the ending. Not noise, not spectacle, but prevention. Because sometimes the most powerful hero is the one who acts before anyone else understands what needs to be saved.